Hey everybody, it's Eric Schlissel, CEO of Cure8'd. I'm here today with Abigail Vivas. Abby, want to give us a little background and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're up to?
Sure. So I am the Chief Equity Officer for the Missouri Division of Cannabis Regulation. My position, I'm actually the first person to sit in this position. It was established when we passed adult use legislation. So I started February of 2023, and we've stood up our micro business program, which is our social equity program in Missouri over the past year. And we issued our first licenses this past fall, and we're getting ready to go into the second round.
Outstanding. I came out in 2019 to Kansas City for this industry showcase. And a gentleman from the Cannabis Control, I'm going to get his title wrong, but he was talking about the program and how they were learning from other markets. But social equity wasn't on the radar. I was very impressed with what he was saying, but it just wasn't a topic. How did this happen?
So if you look across the country, I think of the 38 states that have either medical or adult use, 15 have social equity programs, last I looked. But everybody's kind of in different stages of implementation. So some people haven't issued licenses yet or don't have people operational. Some are just in that infancy planning stage. So this was added as, like I said, as part of our constitutional amendment. So it is ingrained in our constitution in Missouri because it was a ballot initiative. And so this is a great program to really bring equity into cannabis and allow people that maybe would have had a shot at a license previously, like during the medical round, to have that opportunity to get a foothold in the market.
Got it. So is the market at all saturated at this point, given that there was medical, now we're getting into more rounds? How does it play out geographically?
Yeah, so the way that our licenses are issued are by congressional district. So they did the same for medical. So we kept those same boundaries for the microbusiness program as well. And we have 3 rounds of licensing. That's the minimum that we can issue. So 4 wholesale. So we combine a cultivator and a manufacturer into 1 license, and then 2 dispensary per congressional district. So 48 licenses, 3 rounds, 144 total. As far as our current market, we issued the minimum that we had to so that we have room for growth. And the department will be looking into, if we're meeting those market demands in order to determine if we need to issue more licenses.
And are you looking at the gross receipts of all of the different locations that currently have locations? And are you looking at the geographic areas differently given the first couple of years of sales?
So I'm not involved so much in that part of things. I just go where they tell me. No. So we'll see what that looks like. I don't know all the specifics of what that will look like and how to make those determinations.
100%.
But access is definitely of a concern for us for public health reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. I did notice in your regs that you don't require residency for social equity licenses. Was that something that was thought through or just default?
So the first round of licensing, they did say you had to be a Missouri resident, and there was some lawsuits about that due to the interstate commerce clause. And I know this has gone different directions in different states, but for Missouri, they decided to kind of eliminate that possibility and make it so that out-of-state people could do business in Missouri.
It sounds backwards. I'm obviously not a lawyer, but that does sound a little bit backwards that the interstate commerce clause allows for out-of-state applicants.
Yeah, so that they can do business in Missouri. We can't discriminate against people that live in other states as far as doing business in our state.
But that's a federal law, and the federal law doesn't necessarily apply.
It's cannabis. I mean, not everybody does the same thing in every state. So
100% fair. Was this program modeled on any other states' programs?
So I'm not sure with the people that drafted the Constitution where all they look to, but it is similar to things that we see in other states. One of the big components that we're missing that some other states do have, though, is some funding for our licensees. So there wasn't a provision to allow for any of our tax revenue to go towards grant money or anything like that for our licensees.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of lessons on how to not do that are out there. I literally, right before this, just had a meeting about some stuff that's going on in New York. It gets messy when money gets involved.
Yeah, and cannabis.
Well, speaking of messy, it sounds like you had some applicants that were, why don't you tell us? There were some applicants that got their licenses, but they were revoked.
Whenever we issue the licenses, applicants then become licensees, and they enter into the minimum standards and eligibility review process. So we have a team that reviews those for those different criteria, and then I also review them to make sure that they met the eligibility requirements. And during that process, we identified 11 licensees that there was indications that they might not be eligible for one reason or another, and they received notices of pending revocation in December. They were allowed 30 days to provide information to cure that notice, and we had 2 that were able to do so, and they were able to retain their licenses, and then the other 9 were revoked for different reasons of not meeting eligibility. We didn't disclose, specifics about each particular license, but we had different things like disqualifying felony, failure to be owned and operated by an eligible individual, things like that.
I get that. Here in California, we see a lot of folks that have social equity licenses, but have management agreements with other people that actually, take 90% of the revenue out of the social equity applicants, or in this case, it would be a social equity licensee. And these tricky financial arrangements can get really unfair. Are there any provisions built in to go back and check later?
Yeah, so they have to always be owned and operated by eligible individuals. So if they were to change ownership, with department approval, anything that makes changes to those majority owners, which are the ones that have to meet the eligibility criteria, that information still has to be reviewed by me to ensure that they are owned and operated by eligible people. So for us, operated is an extension of ownership, and we would expect that these individuals would have reasonable control over their businesses.
Yeah. They can get a little tricky. I'm going to jump around a little bit if that's all right with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. So
Yep.
I noticed that there's a limit of 250 plants. Do you know how that number was arrived at?
I don't know exactly. I have talked to different people who participated in writing our constitutional amendment. And so I come from a forensic background. And so I've seen a lot of marijuana in my day in different forms. But I didn't really have the clear visual of that until I went into a facility and I was like, how many plants are in this row? And they're like, oh, there's like 1,500. And I was like, okay. So I don't know exactly where that came from. I know some people in industry have crunched some numbers and they've shared some stuff with me about, how they think that they can produce enough to be profitable. I think what's really going to be valuable for our licensees is to be able to co-locate. So we do allow them to share space, within rule. And so I think bringing down that overhead cost will really help our licensees out.
Overhead kills. It's debilitating, especially with the lack of tax relief that we have federally. So that's great. Going from forensics into this role, let's just stay on that for a second since you brought it up. How did that happen?
So I was a forensic scientist for 18 years. I worked in a couple different disciplines in the laboratory, but I spent a lot of time testing drugs. So I've seen cannabis kind of from a different
wrong
lens.
In this context. Sorry, you were testing drugs?
Yes.
Obviously, you had a chemistry set, right?
What's that?
You had a chemistry set to do that with, right? You weren't just
exactly. Or scratch and sniff test. That's what we used to joke about.
Right.
Cops don't like it when you joke about that. So I tested drugs that were taken from people that were going to be charged with possession. And so I kind of saw cannabis change from this. I like to say the youth over 21 these days don't know what it's like to pick stems and seeds out of their marijuana. So I've seen it change from that to going to like really nice packaged buds and all the edibles that we started to see once Colorado became a legal market. And so we've really just seen that landscape of it change. And also approach from prosecutors has changed, not for everybody, but for a lot of them over time, that happened. And when you're sitting there testing this marijuana, but then you're also testing like pounds of meth or pounds of heroin, it's kind of like what's really important in the grand scheme of things. So I was never like this anti-cannabis person necessarily. But then I had a short stint at our Department of Agriculture lab, which does a lot of the same types of testing that we perform on cannabis. And then this position really appealed to me for the opportunity to help people, educate them about the program, give them the tools and the resources that they need to be able to apply and be successful. I like being part of that chain to help people get where they want, because I've met a lot of our licensees and applicants that are just super passionate about cannabis, and I feel really fortunate to be able to help them in that process.
That's really beautiful. And yeah, sticks and stems, or seeds. I was recently overseas and somebody brought me a bag of cannabis because they know what industry I'm in. And I was brought back to the 90s. I'm aging. I was brought back to when get this little bag of that brickweed.
Yep.
It was so brutal. Anyway, I'm glad we're past that as an industry. It's a really good thing.
We've grown.
Yeah, we have. We've really evolved. And, I want to actually stay on the tools provided social equity applicants, because what we've seen in a lot of markets that social equity folks get involved and then they're not ready to run a business. And that gets a lot of folks into trouble. They're overextended and they don't know how to hire, who to hire, and how to stock. Like, it's a completely different thing to sell weed on your couch or to come out of the system with a record and try to figure it all out. It's another to run a business, a retail operation. And does the state provide any kind of guidance for that?
So that's where it gets a little bit tricky for us as regulatory, because we can't provide people business or financial advice. And so my office, I run the Office of Business Opportunity. It's myself and one other person. And so we collaborate with people within our department considerably. But, we're the only two who our sole focus is micro business. And so we've really tried to push out as much as we can to get people through this application stage. And then now, not that it hasn't started before now, but really trying to make that push to provide those resources to people that are now licensees. So whether that's connecting them or facilitating conversations with maybe different people at universities. Missouri has a lot of colleges now that have cannabis programs, and trying to make those connections for people that maybe could help provide them advice about how to put a pitch deck together or put a business plan together, because some people are way farther ahead than others on that process. So whatever that looks like. And also, with these cannabis schools, like thinking about if there's anything that they can provide as far as like, hey, here's the pitfalls of the first year in cultivation. I've also had some conversations with some other groups in Missouri, like trade associations and stuff, for the same kind of thing. Like, you guys can assist these people in places that we can't. I don't run a cultivation facility. It would be kind of silly for me to try and talk about that. So, can you help these licenses in some ways, like doing some mini workshops and things like that? So we might not be able to provide all of that information, but at least trying to make those connections so that people can get it. Recently, I talked to a couple licensees as well that they're forming their own trade association, which I think is going to be invaluable for them. And they're setting up that very thing, like, hey, I've got an HVAC expert. Let me connect you with this person, and trying to do their own workshops. And I think that's great.
That's wonderful. Cure8 participates in a lot of workshops in new states because we'd rather educate early and then answer the detailed questions later as they figure it all out. And there are always a lot of questions. Cure8 is a sister company called Forte, which literally trains business owners in a boot camp. And I want to say it was Maryland that opened an RFI for ancillary services to say, okay, we have a social equity program. What can you provide these people at a discounted rate to help the program be successful and to help people hit the ground running whenever they can hit the ground running? And I find that that's an incredibly useful use of a platform, even if you're just putting together a list and saying, here's some good resources. These are not consultants, not consultants. They're not going to charge you $1 million, but ask these guys some questions. It's a pretty good thing. So what's on the horizon? What's coming next?
So right now we're in our second round of accepting applications. It closes on the 29th, so next Monday. And we have kind of tentatively announced, I believe, that the lottery will be sometime in June. Licenses issued tentatively at the end of July. So we just kind of going through that whole process again, and then we'll have our third round sometime next year. We can't, by Constitution, issue those licenses before March, but we've been trying to be pretty close to those as we can to make sure that we can get these out there and get people up and operational. Because one of the limitations that they have is that they can only do business with one another. So they can't do business with our currently established comprehensive and medical market. They're their own, just separate market that has to work together. I get that face you're making a lot when I say that. So it's really important that we get our people that are cultivating up and running so that our dispensaries can have product, which is also really important in that communication piece between them to make sure that, they don't have their dispensary up and ready to go and they don't have anything to put on the shelf. So we want to make sure that we have those out there so that people can get operational and start having product to sell.
that chicken and egg problem exists everywhere.
Yeah.
It's rough.
Mm-hmm.
So New York's social equity program is off to a bit of a rocky start. Um, some say it's still rocky. Have you been keeping an eye on that? And do you have any thoughts on what they could have done better, maybe?
Honestly, I read some things and I talk to different people at Canada, but I haven't followed everybody super closely. You mentioned Maryland. Maryland has a really robust program, and I do try and look to things that they're doing, or New Jersey, because they do have those kind of secondary resources for like business and things like that, and how we could practically apply that in Missouri. I think that they've got a lot of great things going there, but I don't necessarily follow all the specifics. I think I've heard comments about Missouri has avoided some of the controversy, kind of like for what you said, because we don't give out grant money. We're doing our lottery, our licenses. Excuse me, our licenses are issued by lottery. You would think that wouldn't be something that people would complain about, but then we get the argument that, well, I'm already basically set up and more equipped to be successful in this program. So we still kind of get two sides of it, which I understand. But I think doing it that way has helped us to avoid some of that negative spotlight.
It doesn't seem like you've had any serious lawsuits that have stopped licensing, which is pretty good.
I'm not aware of anything at this time, but
That's a good sign that you're doing things right. Yeah, we've had a few of our clients that are just caught up. We can't launch them because starts and stops and so on. Um, why do you think some people are afraid to enter this market still? Do you see that, or is that not happening in your state where folks are interested but not willing to take that last leap of applying?
financial barriers. A lot of our criteria revolve around low income, like living in a zip code with high unemployment or lower income, higher poverty. One of our criteria is to have a net worth of less than $250,000. So, we're talking about people that come from disproportionately impacted communities. Here, you want a license. Now, do you have $500,000 to get it up and running? And that's just not the component that we can help people with. That's usually the first question I get from people. Like, I get a license, and then is there a funding opportunity? And unfortunately, we don't have that. So I'd say it's still the funding situation.
Yeah, it's at odds, right? You have to be from a certain background, but then you have to have this amount of money. It's like you have to win the lottery in between, you know, having,
After you win the lottery, you have to win the other lottery.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Immaculate conception of money, I guess. um, are you satisfied with how you're off? And I'm asking you to rate yourself here, but in terms of looking through all of these applications, are you satisfied with how the licenses have been awarded, aside from the 11 that had a problem, or the 9 really? Are you satisfied with the applications you're getting in the process?
Yeah, so we had our welcome meeting for our licensees a couple weeks ago, and it was really nice to see some faces that I'd seen at outreach. People that came and got the information and then got their license, and people are just really excited. There's so many people that have such a passion for cannabis and are excited to like give back in this way. Some people want to focus on medical. Some people just want to focus on like terpene and cannabinoid profiles. And so I think that we have some licensees that could do some great things in this market. Not everybody wants the big box cannabis. They want that curated craft product. And I think as people have more experience using cannabis, I think you'll see more of that. I mean, some people are probably always just going to be in it for whatever's cheapest or whatever packaging appeals to them or whatever it is. But I think that they have this opportunity to really fill like this niche market that maybe there's some out there. I'm not saying all cannabis is box cannabis, but to be able to like jump in and like market to people that are looking for specific things that they're not getting in the current market.
Yeah, I'm all about curation, as you can tell by many of our names. Do you expect to have a full product line for folks upon launch, or do you think that the manufacturing components will take a little bit longer than just growing bud?
I've I heard some people at the welcome meeting think that they might be ready for their commencement inspection by the end of the year or the beginning of next year. And they've talked about just starting with flower. I think it'll be maybe kind of up to the dispensaries though, then if like they want to open with just flower or if they want to have a full product line.
Is there anything I'm missing that I should be asking at this point, Abby? Is there anything you want to tell folks that are thinking of getting into the next round or awaiting their licenses or their status after this round?
Yeah, I just think it's a great opportunity for people to get a foothold in this market that might not have ever otherwise had the chance because we're not asking for all that available capital upfront. I do think for everybody it's going to be difficult, just like anybody who opens a small business, pretty much in any market, it's going to be challenging. I think that you need to be passionate about it and make sure you hire the right people, hire talent, know who you're doing business with, and have a good game plan. But it is a great opportunity. There are challenges like we talked about with the 250 plant count and having their own separate market. But I think that we have enough people, at least the people that I met from round one, we have enough people that are really going to do their darndest to make it work and be profitable. We also have a caveat in our constitution that talks about once we have micro businesses that have been operational for a year, the department can issue more licenses and at least more comprehensive licenses, and at least half of those have to go to micro businesses. So they do kind of have this pathway forward to become a comprehensive license if the department chooses to issue more licenses. So I think there are some people that are playing that in game. They are playing that long game of wanting to be able to eventually convert and be a comprehensive licensee.
Totally. Any changes to the program have to be through constitutional amendment?
To some of those things, yeah, because that's the kind of double-edged sword, I guess, of a ballot initiative. If you go back and say, oh yeah, maybe that wasn't like the best thing to put in or word that way, it's a lot harder to change than that.
Yeah, that's going to take a little while. It's funny. I literally just got an email from somebody in Maryland that won a dispensary license and is looking for funding. Just it is clearly not targeted to me. It's kind of a blanket email, but like it seems like a pretty big problem.
Yeah, it is. And I'd had some conversations with one of the banking institutions here, wanting to know kind of about that pathway to comprehensive, like what realistically can these licensees make and be profitable? And I'm like, that's not really my expertise. I can't really provide that information, but I can tell you like what rule and constitution says about, what they can produce. And then we do have this potential pathway to be a comprehensive licensee.
100%. I know credit unions do give some loans, but the terms are pretty harsh. They'll only fund 40 to 60% of it. You have to put up the rest, as opposed to 20% down on a residential property and so on. It's onerous.
Yeah, and we did so for our application. It's pretty streamlined. You have to have a proposed location, but you don't have to show that you have control of it. Obviously, it needs to be a good faith type situation, but you don't have to put any money up front to like hold that facility as far as we're concerned. Our application fee is refundable if you meet all the criteria to apply, but you're not just solely aren't selected by lottery. There's a couple of other little things that go on with that, but I think we've issued a lot of refunds. Oh, I mean, I don't know the exact number right now, but so there's that option for people as well. So I mean, if you're interested, it's refundable. Put your application in, see what happens.
Go get them. Let's go. It's funny because in other places where you do have to have the property, you're paying rent, or you have 20 or 30 applications using the same property because geographically it's the only one available in the region.
Right.
There are all these really shady things that happen. So it's good that your licenses can move if they find a different property or the one falls through. That's really nice.
Yeah, they have to stay in their congressional district, but they can change their facility location just with as everything the asterisks of with department approval. So.
Sure. Okay. Any last words for those that are looking to apply this next round? What have people done wrong that they should avoid doing? You've read all the applications.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything people particularly do wrong, but just I would encourage people to really use the resources we have on the website. There's a lot of tools to help people know what documentation to get, where to get it if they don't have it. There's tutorials that walk them through the entire online application. So I really highly suggest that people use the website before they go in and do their application, because we've tried to provide all the tips and tricks that we can for people to make it as straightforward and simple as possible.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much for your time, Abby. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.